Welcome back to Mandatory Listening. This is your host, Kent Mann, joined today again by the elusive Dan Mann.
Elusive.
Elusive.
You
Is like that word?
Is that my new thing?
I think that's your new title, the Director of Elusiveness.
Then yes, the elusive Dan.
So we just got back from vacation a bit ago, and you spent some time in Kentucky and then Indiana. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a Memorial Day tradition that Hank and I have where we go to the Indy 500 on the Sunday before Memorial Day, and we've done it now probably 6 years in a row. But on the way up, we spend a few days on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. So I'm not sure which of those two things I like better, the Bourbon Trail or the Indy 500. But right now they go together, so that was my vacation.
I think I know which one you like better, and I think our listeners could probably guess too.
Yep. So the Indy 500 is an excuse to go through the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. I've got to go through Kentucky to get to the race.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's something just really magical about just downing over a dozen Busch Lights or Coors Lights. I'm not really sure what they drink in it. Yeah, Keystone Light. But I don't think that quite does it for you as much as a nice glass of whiskey.
How many did you say? A dozen?
A dozen? Yeah.
I don't do a dozen beers in a year.
That's true. I agree with that.
What'd you do?
We went to the beach and spent some time on the Outer Banks around Kill Devil Hills, Nag's Head, that area, and just laid around and pretended like we had nothing on our mind.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was awesome. But
good vacation.
You brought back a little gift for me, and it was the Blood Oath Bourbon Packed 5, which is the 5th edition of it. And I've had every edition that's come out. And I tried the Packed 5 at a bar in Asheville here, and it was probably the best one I've had.
Well, you said a little gift, so I'm offended. That's a big gift.
It's a pretty big gift.
It was a Blood Oath.
Yeah.
Kent.
Blood Oath. It's just the name sounds sinister almost.
It's one of the most attractive and unique bottles in the bourbon world. It's a bit of an interesting story, but the cool thing to me is they come out with one limited release bourbon a year. And so now this is the 5th year in a row. This is the Packed 5. And haven't had it yet. I've got mine sitting on the shelf for a special occasion, and I'm interested to hear your take on it. So you said, how'd you describe it?
So the thing with Blood Oath is that it's not one bourbon in one barrel. They take lost barrels and mix them together. So they have the curator, who I don't know what his name is, but he collects unique barrels that have a unique profile that would otherwise get thrown away or not used or bottled individually, and mixes them together based on his profile and what he wants for the year. And so this particular one had something like a dark chocolate vanilla blend of a few that was kind of sweet. Bourbon is pretty sweet in general, but this was a little more sweet, and it was finished in rum barrels. And so it's just it's you taste the bourbon at the start, and it's below 50% alcohol, so it's not super strong. It's not like one of those ones that'll knock you back. And then the aftertaste is like a dessert. It's like eating ice cream.
So smooth bourbon that finishes with chocolate and vanilla and sweet is, that sounds good.
Yeah, and I did it with just ice. It would be one of those ones that I would be very hesitant about mixing anything in with it because it's so good by itself.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to trying it myself, but it means once I open it, I feel like I have 12 months to finish it off. So yeah. I'm going to want to savor it.
So, all right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. No, I'm just kidding. But so enough about bourbon for now. So I wanted to talk to you today, Dan, because over the last few months, you've started throwing around a few ideas around your second book, and you've been carrying around these laminated infographic sheets, which most people give you a little bit of hell for. And it's a process around diagnosing and leading change in an organization. And it's under an acronym, of course. You are the acronym man.
Not really. This isn't an acronym. It's just 4 steps.
4 steps.
It is. Let me back up just a notch. But when I wrote my book, Orbit, the Art and Science of Influence, I had my dear friend and longtime business inspirer, mentor, Todd Willett. Todd owns Long Lewis Ford down in the Southeast. And Todd did the review of the book and wrote the introduction. And Todd's a very successful businessman. And after he read the book, he endorsed it and felt it was a very good book. And at the very end, he said, I like the book, Dan. He said, however, I think the real challenge is in maintaining excellence. Not just teaching someone something, but how do you maintain excellence. And that was inspiring. And I actually, at the end of the book, I said, that's what I'm going to write on next. So I've been brewing on it now for 2 years. How do you maintain excellence? And it brings me to a phrase that I have said back since the Backrack days. I did not invent it. I did actually bring it from another spot. It's actually quoted by Ray Elliott, who was a University of Illinois football coach back in the 30s. The phrase is gentle pressure relentlessly applied. And that is actually the theme of our Man University series, and it's a concept we talk about an awful lot. Gentle pressure relentlessly applied. There's a restaurateur, Danny Meyer, I believe his name is, who says constant gentle pressure as an approach to maintaining excellence. And so it's not a theme I invented, but I have taken it and gone a step further with the idea of it. And that's really what I'm thinking the book is, what I'm currently working on as my general concept for the book.
I just want to interrupt you briefly to say that, we talk Ray Elliott, football coach. Who was the other guy?
Danny Meyer.
Danny Meyer, restaurateur. I think that leading change is often overlooked and ignored in the retail specialty space because they feel like it's not needed or that demand is always going to trump anything other than, if I just have great product, a great store, then it doesn't matter what my people do. I don't have to lead change. The change is going to come, the market's kind of determining all of my money.
Well, exactly. Let's take those two, before we get into this, let's take those two fields, for example. Let's start with restaurant industry. There are actual government ratings for your capacity to follow food protocols.
Yeah.
And that's seen as your, as a health code. So you're 99% or you get an A or you get a B or a C. So you go into a restaurant and you see the restaurant has a 78% health code rating.
You're getting out.
It means that they don't execute on the success of the food, according to their regulations enough.
Yeah.
So it's a C. But the pressure is on a restaurant to get every single plate done well. Healthy, no risk of any sort of foodborne disease or any sort of, any risk to the public. That's one side of it. But also each plate is consistent in its taste, in the way it looks, arriving at the table with the right amount of heat or cool. And all of that to say that the pressure is on restaurants to be consistent with every plate and with every meal.
Yeah, and it's funny because let's say because I started the gentle pressure relentlessly applied with diagnosing a problem and then leading a change towards growth. It's like in the restaurant, when you get a rating, let's say you're at 95 and the next year comes out and it's 94 or 90 or 85. The restaurant owner is not going, oh, all right, well, that's it. It's just the market. People are...
It's harder.
There's a standard.
Can't hire good people.
It's almost like in medicine, there's a standard of care. And if you don't follow that, then you're rated against that standard. And so then the restaurateur says, okay, we're going to take a step back. We're going to clean the kitchen. Okay, we're going to take a step back and buy better ingredients. Okay, I need to clean house. My people are not executing on my standard. And so it's not a, okay, we got 100 rating, now we're good, we never have to worry about it again, we don't have to clean the kitchen anymore. It's constant or gentle pressure relentlessly applied continuously.
That's right.
Year over year.
And the phrase actually started in, from a football coach who, and back to football or sports, if you're looking at, the NBA or the NFL or NCAA teams, they are measuring effectiveness, quarterbacks. It's a touchdown to interception ratio. It's the line. How many offsides penalties do they have? It's the running back. How many yards does the running back gain in the course, on average, of a game? Those are metrics toward the performance. And so there is an approach to constantly improving, to gently but relentlessly moving toward improvement and moving toward changing to proficiency. Mm-hmm. And so in the restaurant world and in the sports world, we can see the need for constant improvement and constant growth and constantly moving toward excellence. For our listeners in specialty retail, this is oftentimes the missing ingredient. Yeah. I find that owners and managers believe that what's happening in their business is happening to them, and these are forces they can't execute any change to. These are marketplace forces, or these are consumer forces, or these are other issues that are out of their control. control. Weather is my enemy, or the market interest in online purchasing is my enemy, or the inability to find and retain great staff is my enemy. And the owner or the manager simply has no recourse but to let it happen to them. And I would argue that that's not the case, that the owner, the manager of a business can execute change toward improvement, toward excellence, toward getting the consistent result that's going to bring about a better commercial result.
So you want to apply something that the most prestigious and entertaining and really consumer-facing part of the business world, and let's take what they do towards retail.
That's right.
And so did you come up with the 4 steps, or how did you come up with, did you sit down and say, this is what I've done in the past, this is what the people who have done it the best have done in the past? How did you come up with this?
Yeah, this is you said it exactly. I've used the phrase gentle pressure relentlessly applied for many, many years, and I've clearly got it memorized.
Relentless pressure, relentlessly applied, relentless.
And so as I've begun to develop the book and think about how to talk about this, I've narrowed it from my experience personally and what I've observed in others to 4 areas of focus. And those 4 areas, those 4 things taken together are what gentle pressure looks like. And first of all, it is getting an agreement on the approach. The first step to gentle pressure relentlessly applied is making sure that everyone that you're involved with agrees with you on the approach, agreement on approach. And I call that alignment. If we have all of our team members, all of our staff, all of us pulling in the same direction because we all understand on how we're going to do something, we have a chance at success. Now, that's the first big mistake of leadership, is assuming or believing that everyone agrees with you on how we're going to do something.
Or that everybody wants to get better.
That's right. So without that, the other steps are not going to happen. If you don't have agreement that this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to approach this, then you are probably not going to get the results.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to my retail days where the running shoes or an outdoor store where I worked, it's, you spend a lot of time around shoes or hard goods because those are what you get into the sport for. Those are like what your enthusiasm lies or where your enthusiasm lies. And so oftentimes managers or owners will push for more apparel sales, or why aren't we need to upsell more or get more items on a transaction. And the miss there, I believe, is that why should I care about your apparel sales? It's almost your apparel sales, not mine, because I'm getting paid no matter what.
Well, there you go. It's a belief that the owner has that they have an agreement on the approach without having the agreement.
And if I just say, yeah, we need to get our, if I'm the owner, I just say, okay, we need to get our nutrition sales up or our apparel sales up, and say, yeah, guys, let's go after it. I really want to, let's do this. And here's a reward if you do this many apparel sales. And the whole staff is thinking like, I don't care. I'm getting paid either way.
Yeah, that is a fundamental problem in retail. And so what happens is that, well, let's stay in the running world, for example. I was recently with a running retailer in a multiple store situation where every store in that group of stores had a manager with each one having a different opinion about the fit process. So how do we decide what shoe is right for this runner? Every one of the managers of those businesses had a different point of view. Some had a very technology-driven approach. Some had a very organic approach. Some had old-school Brannick device approach. Each one was different. All that's fine, except that the owner believed that there was a systematic approach being used to diagnose and evaluate customers' foot and pick the right shoe. And that was not the case.
There was 8 different ones or 10 different ones.
That's exactly right.
And even then, imagine internally, if the manager does not agree with the organization, of course, every staff member then probably does not agree either. And so
there's your first step to actually creating change and getting the results, an agreement on approach. The second step is metrics for assurance. Metrics for assurance, and I call that transparency. And that is, how do you know that you are getting what you want unless you measure it?
Yeah.
Unless you have some metrics approach to identifying that you are getting the results you want. So metrics for assurance is very often overlooked in specialty retail.
Let me go back really quick and let me ask you, why is metrics for assurance called transparency?
Because when we begin to measure something, it exposes the reality of something. So let's say, for example, in your track and field career, that your coach, when he put you through a workout, simply evaluated your workout based on how much you were sweating or their perceived sense of your working hard. So, yeah, Ken, that was really good. It seemed like you did those 4 100-meter dashes in a lot faster. It seemed to me like you were really working hard. I really appreciate the effort. That's the way we go about evaluating a lot of things in retail, but that's not how you would evaluate someone's track performance.
Not at all.
You're tracking that with an actual stopwatch to tell whether or not you actually did go faster and therefore were improving.
Yeah.
Without it, then I'm believing something that's not true. So transparency creates the actual result without any emotion, without any interpretation. It is the actual result, and so that's why it's called transparency.
Now, going back to these are 4 steps or 4 elements of this leading change and improvement. So do I have to, if I'm coming up with this and saying I need to get agreement and then I need to create some metrics for assurance and create some transparency around measuring result, do I have to agree on the metrics? Do you see what I'm saying? Do they have to be wrapped up in each other?
I think this is all tied together, yes.
So that if I come forward and say, okay, guys, we're doing an initiative here. Do we all agree that this is a big issue? And now we're going to start tracking your numbers. What happens if I don't agree that those are good numbers?
Well, I'm not going to be motivated by them. In fact, I'm going to blame them for my failure.
So if I just roll forward and say, okay, we're going to now start tracking this and this and this and this, and the whole time I don't agree that that's a worthy metric and that those are the wrong metrics to be using, or I don't believe in metrics in general.
Yeah, that's a fundamental disagreement on approach.
Because I can agree that I want to get better, I want the store to be more profitable, but I don't agree that metrics are useful
or that these metrics matter.
Yeah.
So it is exactly true that we must find the metrics that we can all agree to, the metrics that matter. And frankly, if you have a team member who doesn't like the metrics, doesn't want to be evaluated, you may have the wrong person who will not engage that way. And what I see in specialty retail is a reluctance to measure individual performance. And that's what's, I think, that causes us to not know that we're improving, not know that we're learning, not know that we're getting better. But, back to the football example, every single player on that team has a set of metrics that they're judged by, number of yards after catch or completion percentage. Every single waiter or waitress in a restaurant gets evaluated, and that's called the tip at the end of the meal. How well did you do? I get to decide.
Yeah. All right, guys, if I'm a coach for a football team, all right, guys, we really gave up a lot of yards there. We really just had too many interceptions. We missed way too many field goals, guys. Come on. We didn't execute on a blitz. No, you're going back to the linebacker who missed the blitz and you say, hey, man, what did you just do there? It's not a team thing. Hey, why did you miss that field goal, man? Like we drilled that 100 times.
Yeah. This is transparency. This is what it looks like when you're evaluated objectively on the metrics of your performance. So that's a key step to leading change, is having metrics that create, and I say metrics for assurance.
Yeah.
That assures that the results are there, assures that we're learning, assures we're getting better. And from the restaurant world, the health department is assuring the public that this restaurant is up to code. Here's the measurement of it. It is a very objective evaluation.
Is this a safe restaurant? Here are the metrics of assurance that this is a safe restaurant for you to take your family to eat.
Exactly right. So that brings us to the third element of leading change and gentle pressure relentlessly applied, and that's training and coaching. And so the training and coaching piece is if we're setting expectations for a team member and we are beginning to evaluate and measure their performance, it's incumbent upon us to train, to provide the resources, to provide the information, to provide the development.
Instead of saying, oh, all right, month is over, you didn't hit your metrics, you're fired.
Yeah,
that's an excuse.
That's exactly right. If I'm taking responsibility for change, then it's important for me as a manager or owner to develop and create the skills for my team. And in fact, we call that third piece the skills. So training and coaching are here, and both words are here because they're two separate activities. One activity, training, that's the development of skills. That's picture Tiger Woods on the practice range or on the putting green, repeatedly practicing, repeatedly working through the swing, getting a coach to observe him, giving him some feedback, working on his grip, working on the follow-through, continuing to practice. That's training. That's the football team doing two-a-days. That's everything that's off when the game's not being played, the training and development of the skills. Coaching happens in the game. The game is being played. The coach is on the sidelines. He calls a timeout. He brings the team over. He gives them a course correction in the game to go about slightly adjusting the approach in the game. And I find that in retail, we're very reluctant to do the coaching piece.
Yeah.
In fact, we're reluctant to do the training piece as well.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the quote-unquote training piece for our listeners oftentimes just gets thrown to, hop on this website and do some product knowledge or learn some product knowledge.
Yeah. What I admire about one of our clients, Vans has an 1.5 to 3 hour window for some constant coaching on the floor during the workday. They're paying attention during the day on the sales floor to every employee's behavior, and the team lead is coaching and directing and refining the behavior, even while the shift is underway. That's oftentimes missed. And in fact, the Man Group is full disclosure, Man Group is a training organization. We do training. We find that training succeeds with people when it is in the context of some metrics and when it is in the context of great agreement on the approach. We fail, and our clients fail, when people try to offer training and it's the only thing offered. There are no metrics for assurance. There is no agreement on approach. In fact, oftentimes in training, we spend our first half of our day trying to get agreement on approach.
Yeah. And then there is no coaching in the sense of, okay, once we've left our client, there's no responsibility. They just assume, you guys were in the same room with me. You saw it. Why aren't you doing it now? Instead of saying, I'm going to constantly evaluate you on this standard that we all learned together.
That's right. So training and coaching are a crucial part of leading change, but they can't be done by themselves. They are part of an overall approach that includes the metrics and includes the agreement and alignment on the approach. That brings us to the fourth element of gentle pressure relentlessly applied, and that's the culture of accountability. The culture of accountability, and the subset of that, I call that integrity. And that is, if I'm an owner of a business, then this goes beyond just setting up metrics and setting up training and following some sort of protocol. It is now incumbent upon me, the owner, to have a culture that evaluates, a culture that follows up, a culture that remains consistent. That's actually what gentle pressure relentlessly applied looks like. It's that culture of, we made an agreement, we decided how we're going to do this, now we're actually going to do it. The owner sets the example. The owner actually does follow up. The owner does actually create accountability around expecting to see improvement.
Yeah, and I think this is the big miss where, and I love that that you use the word integrity for that, because it is just that no matter what, this is not something that I do with just my full-timers. This isn't something that I do just with my friends that I get along with, that I know they're not going to be mad at me if I tell them what to do. This happens with everyone, every new hire, every person, my best friend. If a lot of times having a family member or whatever, you hold everyone accountable to the result. And because we all agree, not that anyone has a way out, not that anyone has an excuse, there's no excuses allowed. And it becomes that the lowest level employee can go up to the owner and say, I'm going to hold you accountable too.
Yeah. I was talking with a client of ours in the past 2 weeks who talked about how much success she'd been having with their new employees and how bringing folks in and teaching them these approaches was going well. Her concern was her existing staff, who was not following this guideline, was degrading and affecting her overall effectiveness. And that's this miss of the culture of accountability, where it is our way. This person's untouchable because they've been here a few years and they have their own style. But this training that we're doing is exactly the opposite of that. But we can't address that behavior because that person's been here long enough to do their own thing. These kinds of behaviors really hurt your effectiveness as a leader, and it is in consistency and accountability that your credibility and your integrity is shown to be, this is how we do it here.
Yeah, and I just think that no matter what business world or really just section of where you're putting your effort you go, what a culture of accountability looks and feels like, and it's something that you want to be a part of. It's not something that what I pictured is you just get recruited to join Nick Saban's football team, the Alabama Roll Tide. You go in there expecting accountability and integrity, that no matter what, if you mess up, someone's coming down on you.
And you know that they are that way because they are successful. They are successful because they are that way. And
it's not an accident.
No, this is a very intentional. So
it's not just because they recruit the best talent. I mean, they also do that, but that's only half of the battle.
Absolutely. It's a big topic. It's not something we can cover in one podcast, but you've got the formula here. Gentle pressure, relentlessly applied is basically 4 steps, 4 things to remember. The agreement on approach, the metrics for assurance, training and coaching, and the culture of accountability. Taken together, number 1 can help you diagnose where you're not getting results. But secondly, it's how you can actually initiate change when you want to make it.
Yeah. And then looking back, you can start to say, you know what, this initiative failed because I'd never got agreement in the first place. I'm holding people accountable to something they never agreed to.
So let's agree, Kent, that we're going to go through each of these 4 in their own podcast and explain them in greater detail and make sure all of our listeners understand each of the 4 elements in subsequent podcasts.
I do think that it would be worth some time on each of these because I want to break down some more examples and I want to get really specific on some examples that we use when we're in front of people besides just sports and restaurants, because I do think this is important for leadership development.
Let's bring bourbon into it somehow.
Well, at the beginning of every podcast, we have to dedicate 10 minutes to bourbon, or either bourbon or Game of Thrones.
Okay, we are at the what is this? The end of the podcast club.
End of the podcast club.
So I think if you have made it this long, we have a really cool infographic that depicts everything we've just said. I can send you a PDF of that, or I can send you a beautiful laminated card for your use.
It's actually really fun.
Yeah, it's absolutely. So if you're interested in knowing more about this, I can send you the information. Just let us know that you just made it to the end of the podcast.
Yep. Well, thanks, Dan. It's always a pleasure to get you back on here. You've lost your privileges as host, but every once in a while we'll let you out of the dungeon.
Looking forward to the next one.